Good evening. I want to discuss something with you today that requires careful attention and a clear head. What I am about to present involves documented facts, official government responses, and scientific observations that have accumulated over recent months. I have spent over 4 decades in astrophysics and planetary science, and I must tell you that the situation surrounding 3I Atlas demands serious examination. Let us begin with what we know for certain. On December 31st, 2025, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States issued a formal response to a Freedom of Information Act request concerning the interstellar object designated 3I Atlas. This response, documented under reference number F202600231, contains specific legal language that carries significant implications. I want to walk you through exactly what this language means and why it matters from a scientific and procedural standpoint. 3I Atlas is the third confirmed interstellar visitor to pass through our solar system. The first was 1I Oumuamua, detected in October 2017. The second was 2I Borisov, observed in August 2019. These objects share a common characteristic. They originated from beyond our solar system, traveling on hyperbolic trajectories that indicate they are not gravitationally bound to our sun. They came from somewhere else in the galaxy. When 3I Atlas was first detected, initial assessments classified it as a cometary body, a frozen remnant from another star system carrying primordial material from its place of origin. This classification was reasonable given our limited initial observations. However, as data accumulated through the final months of 2025 and into 2026, a series of anomalies emerged that do not fit comfortably within standard cometary models. I want to explain these anomalies systematically because understanding them is essential to understanding why certain agencies may have taken the positions they have. The first significant anomaly concerns the chemical composition of 3I Atlas. Spectroscopic observations conducted by the Very Large Telescope in Chile during December 2025 detected the presence of atomic nickel in the object's coma. Now let me explain why this is noteworthy. In cometary science, we expect to find certain elements and compounds: water, ice, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, various organic molecules, silicate dust. These are the building blocks of comets as we understand them. Nickel exists in comets, but typically in compound form, bound to other elements in mineral structures. Detecting atomic nickel, individual nickel atoms in their elemental state, at the distances 3I Atlas was observed is unusual. In my experience, atomic nickel appears in cometary spectra primarily when objects approach very close to the sun, where intense heating can break apart molecular bonds and release individual metal atoms. 3I Atlas was not in that regime when these observations were made. The detection therefore requires explanation. From an engineering perspective, nickel is a metal of considerable importance. It forms the basis for numerous high-performance alloys used in aerospace applications. Inconel, Hastelloy, Waspalloy, these nickel-based superalloys are specifically designed to withstand extreme temperatures and corrosive environments. I'm not suggesting any particular conclusion from this observation. I am simply noting that the presence of atomic nickel at these distances is not typical of known cometary behavior. The second anomaly involves the ratio of carbon dioxide to water in 3I Atlas. The James Webb Space Telescope conducted observations that measured this ratio at approximately 7.6. Let me provide context for that number. Comets that formed in our solar system typically exhibit carbon dioxide to water ratios well below 1. The precise value depends on where in the solar system the comet formed, but values above 2 are uncommon. A ratio of 7.6 is approximately 700% higher than what we typically observe in solar system comets. This does not necessarily mean 3I Atlas is artificial. It may indicate that the object formed in a very different environment than our local comets. Different stellar systems have different chemical abundances. A star with higher carbon abundance relative to oxygen would produce planetesimals with different ice compositions. This is a valid natural explanation, but however, the magnitude of the deviation is substantial enough to warrant careful documentation and analysis. When we observe something that differs from all previous examples by a factor of 7 or more, scientific rigor demands that we investigate thoroughly before dismissing it as merely unusual natural variation. The third area of concern involves the trajectory of 3I Atlas. All objects in space follow paths determined by gravitational forces. All objects in space follow paths determined by gravitational forces. These paths are predictable. Given sufficient observational data, we can calculate where an asteroid or comet will be years or decades in the future with considerable precision. 3I Atlas has exhibited what observers describe as subtle variations from predicted gravitational trajectories. The object appears to be making course adjustments that are not fully explained by the gravitational influence of known bodies in our solar system. Now, I must be careful here because non-gravitational acceleration is not unprecedented in cometary science. Outgassing from a comet surface can produce thrust, much like a very inefficient rocket. This effect was observed with Oumuamua and contributed to the controversy surrounding that object. The question is whether the observed trajectory variations fall within the range explainable by known outgassing physics, or whether they exceed what our models can accommodate. The current trajectory of 3I Atlas takes it toward Jupiter. Specifically, the object is approaching Jupiter's Hill sphere, the gravitational boundary where the giant planet's influence dominates over the sun's. The precision of this approach has drawn attention from researchers who note that it resembles the gravity assist maneuvers used by human spacecraft. I want to be clear about what this does and does not prove. A natural object can, by chance, follow a trajectory that resembles a planned maneuver. The solar system is vast, and over billions of years, countless objects have passed near Jupiter. Some of them, by statistical probability, would have approached in ways that look deliberate to human observers. We must be cautious about inferring intent from trajectory alone. However, when trajectory anomalies combine with chemical anomalies and compositional anomalies, the cumulative picture becomes more complex. Each individual observation might have a mundane explanation. The question is whether the collection of observations as a whole fits within known natural parameters. This brings us to the institutional response to 3I Atlas, which is where the situation becomes particularly interesting from a procedural standpoint. In late 2025, as 3I Atlas approached Mars, NASA's MAVEN spacecraft was positioned to conduct observations. MAVEN, which stands for Mars Atmosphere and Volatile Evolution, has been orbiting Mars since September 2014. Its instruments are designed to study the Martian upper atmosphere, but they can also be directed at other targets of opportunity. According to publicly available information, MAVEN experienced a significant anomaly during the period when it was positioned to observe 3I Atlas at close range. The spacecraft's telemetry ceased, and NASA characterized this as a technical malfunction, possibly related to solar activity. I have reviewed the available solar monitoring data from that period. Multiple spacecraft and ground stations continuously track solar activity. The records do not show unusual solar flare activity corresponding to the time of MAVEN's anomaly. This does not prove the official explanation is incorrect. Solar effects can be localized and directional, but it does mean the explanation cannot be independently verified through standard solar monitoring data. What we can say with certainty is that MAVEN's observation opportunity was lost. Whatever data the spacecraft might have collected during that window is either unavailable or inaccessible to the scientific community. This is a factual statement about the current state of available information. Now let us examine the CIA's response to the Freedom of Information Act request, because the specific language used carries precise legal meaning. When a citizen requests documents from a government agency under FOIA, several responses are possible. The agency can provide the requested documents. It can provide redacted versions with sensitive information removed. It can state that no responsive documents exist, or it can refuse to confirm or deny the existence of documents. This last option is known as a Glomar response, named after a CIA ship called the Hughes Glomar Explorer that was involved in a covert operation during the Cold War. The Glomar response is not a casual denial. It is a specific legal mechanism used when the very acknowledgement that documents exist or do not exist would itself reveal classified information. The CIA's response regarding 3I Atlas invoked the Glomar doctrine. The agency stated that it can neither confirm nor deny the existence of records responsive to the request. This language is important because it tells us something about how the agency categorizes the subject matter. If 3I Atlas were simply a natural astronomical object of no intelligent significance, the agency would have no sources or methods to protect. It could simply state that it has no relevant records, or that any records it has are purely scientific in nature and can be released. The Glomar invocation indicates that even acknowledging whether such records exist would reveal something the agency considers classified. The legal basis cited in the response was Executive Order 13526, specifically Section 3.6a. This executive order governs the classification of national security information. Section 3.6a addresses information that could cause damage to national security if disclosed. I want to be precise about what this does and does not mean. The invocation of this executive order indicates that the CIA considers information about 3I Atlas to fall within national security classification frameworks. It does not tell us what specific information they may have, or why they consider it sensitive. The classification could relate to the object itself, to the methods used to observe it, to the sources of information about it, or to analyses and conclusions drawn from observations. What we can observe is that an astronomical object has been placed within the same legal framework used for matters such as nuclear weapons information, military operations, and intelligence sources. This is unusual for a cometary body. It may have explanations that do not involve exotic conclusions. Perhaps the CIA has observation platforms in space whose capabilities they wish to protect. Perhaps they have intercepted communications from other nations about the object. The Glomar response does not specify, but the response exists, and it exists in the public record. Reference number F2026-0231, dated December 31st, 2025. These are documented facts. Let me now discuss what the amateur astronomy community has observed, because scientific inquiry is not limited to government agencies and large institutions. Throughout late 2025 and early 2026, numerous amateur astronomers have trained their telescopes on 3I Atlas. Their observations, while lacking the resolution of professional instruments, provide independent data points that can be compared against official reports. Several amateur observers have noted that the object's tail structure appears unusual. Standard cometary tails form through two mechanisms. Dust tails consist of particles pushed away from the comet by solar radiation pressure. Ion tails form when solar wind strips electrons from gas molecules, creating plasma that follows magnetic field lines. Both tail types point generally away from the sun. Some observers have reported that portions of 3I Atlas's tail structure do not conform to these expected patterns. Specifically, there appear to be collimated features, narrow streams that maintain their coherence over significant distances. This is not typical of normal cometary outgassing, which tends to expand and diffuse. I must note that amateur observations have limitations. Atmospheric distortion, equipment variations, and processing artifacts can create apparent features that do not exist in the actual object. Professional verification of amateur reports is necessary before drawing conclusions. However, when multiple independent observers report similar features, the observations warrant serious attention. The scientific community now faces an unusual situation. On one hand, there are observations from multiple sources suggesting that 3I Atlas exhibits properties not easily explained by standard cometary models. On the other hand, the institutions with the most capable observation platforms are either unable to share their data or are actively declining to do so. This creates an information asymmetry that complicates scientific analysis. We cannot evaluate what we cannot see. We cannot analyze data that is withheld. We can only work with what is available through public channels and draw appropriately limited conclusions. Let me address the broader context of interstellar objects because 3I Atlas does not exist in isolation. It is the third such object we have detected, and each previous detection has generated its own set of unresolved questions. 1I Oumuamua, detected in 2017, exhibited several anomalies that remain unexplained. Its shape estimated from brightness variations, appeared highly elongated. Unlike any asteroid or comet in our solar system, it showed acceleration that could not be fully explained by gravity alone. It had no visible coma or tail despite passing close to the Sun. These characteristics led some researchers to propose artificial origin hypotheses, though the scientific consensus remains that it was likely a natural object with unusual properties. 2I Borisov, detected in 2019, was more clearly cometary in nature. It displayed a visible coma and tail, and its composition was broadly consistent with solar system comets. Though not identical, it generated less controversy than Oumuamua because it behaved more like objects we understand. 3I Atlas combines elements that have generated questions about both previous visitors. It has cometary characteristics like outgassing and coma formation, but it also has anomalous properties like unusual chemical ratios and trajectory variations that fall outside normal parameters. The pattern of successive interstellar visitors exhibiting anomalies is worth noting, even if we cannot draw definitive conclusions from it. We have detected 3 such objects. 2 of them have generated significant scientific questions that remain unresolved. This may indicate that interstellar objects are genuinely different from solar system objects in ways we do not yet understand, or it may indicate something else entirely. I want to discuss what I consider appropriate scientific methodology for approaching these questions. When confronted with anomalous data, the scientific method requires several steps. First, verify the observations. Are the instruments functioning correctly? Are there calibration issues? Can the observations be replicated independently? Second, examine whether existing models can accommodate the data with minor adjustments. Perhaps our understanding is incomplete rather than wrong. Third, if existing models cannot accommodate the data, develop new hypotheses that can be tested. Fourth, design experiments or observations that can distinguish between competing hypotheses. This process takes time. It requires patience. It requires willingness to say, we do not know, when we do not know. The challenge with 3I Atlas is that some of the necessary data appears to be unavailable. We cannot verify certain observations because the instruments that could make them are either malfunctioning or their data is being withheld. We cannot develop fully informed hypotheses because we may be missing critical information. The scientific process is impaired when information flow is restricted. This is not a criticism of any specific institution. Agencies have legitimate reasons for protecting certain types of information, but it is an observation about the current state of scientific inquiry regarding this object. As 3I Atlas continues its journey through our solar system, heading toward its encounter with Jupiter's gravitational influence, the questions surrounding it remain unresolved. We have chemical data that does not match known cometary patterns. We have trajectory data suggesting accelerations not fully explained by gravity and outgassing. We have a government agency treating information about the object as classified at the highest levels. And we have lost our best observation opportunity when Maven went dark. Each of these elements can be explained individually through conventional means. The chemical anomalies might reflect the unique environment where the object formed. The trajectory variations might result from outgassing we have not fully characterized. The classification might protect observation methods rather than conclusions about the object. The Maven failure might be exactly what NASA says it was, but the collection of elements together creates a picture that many observers find difficult to reconcile with purely conventional explanations. I have lived long enough to know that the universe frequently surprises us. What seems impossible often turns out to be merely improbable. What seems anomalous often turns out to be our first glimpse of a new category of natural phenomena. Throughout my career, I have seen established scientific consensus overturned repeatedly as new data accumulated, so I do not claim to know what 3I Atlas is. I do not claim that it is artificial, and I do not claim that it is natural. I claim only that the available evidence is insufficient to draw firm conclusions either way, and that the restriction of information flow is hampering the scientific process that might resolve these questions. What I find most significant about this situation is not any individual anomaly. It is the institutional response. When a government agency invokes national security classification frameworks for an astronomical object, it suggests that someone with access to more complete information than the public possesses has drawn conclusions they consider sensitive. This does not tell us what those conclusions are. They might be mundane. Perhaps the sensitivity relates to observation technology rather than the object itself. Perhaps there are geopolitical dimensions involving other nations' interest in the object. Perhaps the conclusions are tentative, and officials want to avoid public speculation before reaching certainty. But the response exists, the classification exists, the Glomar denial exists. These are facts that require no interpretation or opinion. They are documented in official correspondence that is part of the public record. As we move further into 2026, 3i Atlas will continue its trajectory toward Jupiter. Additional observations will become possible as it moves through different regions of our solar system. Perhaps new data will resolve some of the outstanding questions. Perhaps it will deepen them. What I would encourage is continued observation by all available means. Amateur astronomers should continue documenting what they see. Academic researchers should continue analyzing public data. Those with access to professional instrumentation should continue requesting observation time. The scientific community should continue pressing for release of data that might inform our understanding. The history of astronomy is filled with objects that seemed anomalous until we understood them better. Pulsars were initially called little green men, before we understood they were rotating neutron stars. Gamma ray bursts were mysteries for decades before we understood their origins in stellar explosions and neutron star mergers. Many phenomena that seemed impossible turned out to be natural once we developed the theoretical frameworks to understand them. 3i Atlas may follow this pattern. It may be a natural object from a stellar system with very different chemistry than our own, exhibiting properties that expand our understanding of what comets can be. This is a scientifically conservative explanation that requires no revolutionary assumptions, or it may be something else, something that requires us to expand our categories of what exists in the universe. I cannot tell you which possibility is correct because I do not have sufficient information to make that determination. No one in the public sphere does, given current information restrictions. What I can tell you is that this object deserves continued attention. It deserves continued observation. It deserves continued analysis. And it deserves continued pressure for transparency from institutions that may be holding relevant information. There is another chemical signature I have not yet discussed that adds to the complexity of this object. When astronomers analyzed the spectroscopic data, when they looked at the ratios of different isotopes in the comet's composition, they found something extraordinary. The deuterium to hydrogen ratio is high. Very high. Deuterium is heavy hydrogen, a hydrogen atom with an extra neutron. In the early universe, right after the Big Bang, there was a certain amount of deuterium created. Over time, as stars formed and died, as stellar nucleosynthesis created heavier elements, the ratio of deuterium to normal hydrogen changed. By measuring this ratio, you can estimate when and where an object formed. And 3i Atlas's ratio suggests it formed in a very old stellar environment, possibly in a star system that formed when the Milky Way galaxy was still young, when the universe was only a few billion years old. This comet might be 10 billion years old, maybe older. Think about that timeline. 10 billion years ago, the universe was 3.8 billion years old. The Milky Way was still assembling itself from smaller galaxies. The Sun did not exist yet. Earth did not exist yet. Life had not emerged anywhere in our solar system because our solar system had not formed. But somewhere out there, around a star we will never identify, in a planetary system that is now destroyed, this chunk of ice and rock and organic molecules was forming, and it has been traveling ever since. For 10 billion years, this object has existed, preserved in the cosmic freezer of interstellar space, unchanged, untouched, carrying the chemistry of the ancient universe locked in its ices, until now, until it passed close to our sun, and that ancient chemistry was finally released, finally revealed, finally studied by beings who evolved on a planet that did not exist when the comet formed. We are looking at a time capsule from the early universe. We are seeing what the cosmos was like billions of years before our own existence. Let me return to the tail structure, because this is where the physics becomes most challenging to explain through conventional means. A recent preprint paper appeared on the arXiv server titled "The Anti-Tail of 3i Atlas: wobbled before perihelion. An antitail is typically an optical illusion, a trick of perspective where the comet's tail appears to point toward the sun instead of away from it, caused by Earth crossing the plane of the comet's orbit. But the new data, analyzed by a team of independent researchers and corroborated by ground-based telemetry, suggests that the antitail of 3I Atlas is not just a trick of the light. It is a physical structure, and it is massive. According to the latest measurements, this feature extends for a distance larger than the gap between Earth and the Moon, a trail of material or something else stretching out for over 400,000 kilometers. But size is not the smoking gun. It is the movement. Comet tails are passive. They are dust and gas pushed by the solar wind and radiation pressure. They drift. They flow. They do not wobble. The paper details a series of oscillations detected in the antitail just before the object reached perihelion, its closest point to the sun. These were not random fluctuations. They were rhythmic, precise, almost mechanical. The data shows a frequency of oscillation that matches no known natural outgassing process. If this were a simple vent of gas, it would be chaotic, or it would rotate with the object. But 3I Atlas is not rotating in a way that explains this. The wobble is independent of the object's spin. Dr. Avi Loeb has released a commentary on this, and his words are being shared across scientific channels. He points out that a wobble of this magnitude, involving this much mass, implies a transfer of momentum. In simple terms, something pushed back. If you're trying to stabilize a craft, or a rock if you want to stick to the official story, against the intense gravitational pull of the sun, you make adjustments. You fire thrusters. You shift weight. You create a wobble in your wake. The density of this antitail is wrong. Spectroscopic analysis is coming back with readings that are baffling the models. We are seeing absorption lines that should not be there. It is not just water, ice, and dust. There are heavy elements, complex signatures. Some researchers have noted that it looks less like a tail and more like an exhaust plume, a magnetic exhaust. We are looking at an object that appears to be correcting its path, an object that is trailing a structure larger than the distance to the moon. And the mainstream media, they are talking about a beautiful celestial event. They are telling you to get your binoculars. They are not telling you that the tail is vibrating. Why? Maybe because they do not know how to explain it, or maybe because they do. We are seeing a pattern here. First, the silence from Maven. Then, the dimming of the object as it approached perihelion. And now this, a controlled oscillation in a structure that defies physics. The closer we look, the less it looks like a comet, and the more it looks like something else. We have to ask ourselves, if this is a machine, what is it doing? Is it braking? Is it scanning? Or is it simply stabilizing itself for the encounter with Jupiter? The wobble occurred right before perihelion. That is the point of maximum stress. That is the point where you would need to be most careful if you were navigating a gravity well. And now it is coasting toward Jupiter. The latest trajectory models show a slight deviation, a tiny, almost imperceptible shift in its orbit that occurred exactly when the wobble was detected. It changed lanes. There is another piece of data that has emerged from amateur networks that deserves attention. The photometric light curve of 3I Atlas over recent observation periods shows something unusual. A light curve is a graph of brightness over time. For a normal comet, this line should be messy, jagged, random, noisy. Comets rotate, they tumble, they have uneven surfaces. The light reflects off ice, then rock, then ice again. It is chaotic. But the light curve of 3I Atlas shows something different. It is flat, perfectly flat, and then drop, flat, drop, flat, drop. These are not random fluctuations. These are pulses. The object is dimming by consistent magnitudes at regular intervals, precise as a metronome. Nature does not make straight lines. Nature does not keep time to the millisecond. We are seeing what appears to be a strobe effect, but it is not flashing light at us. It is blocking light from us. It is an inverse signal. And here is where it connects to the paper about the wobbling tail. If you overlay the graph of the tail's wobble with the graph of these dimming events, they match. When the tail swings left, the object dims. When the tail swings right, the object returns to baseline. This is not a tumble. This is a mechanism. Think about the physics of that. A structure larger than the distance to the moon is swinging back and forth in perfect sync with the rotation of the main body. That requires a rigid connection. That requires structural integrity that ice and dust simply do not have. If you tried to swing a cloud of dust that size back and forth, it would dissipate. It would tear itself apart. But this structure is holding together. The most significant aspect may be the direction this structure is pointing. If this were a comet, the tail would point away from the sun. That is the law of physics. The solar wind pushes the gas and dust outward. But 3i Atlas is breaking this law. The latest astrometric data, triangulated from observatories in Australia and South Africa, shows that the anti-tail is not aligned with the solar wind vector. It is off by 12 degrees. 12 degrees might not sound like much, but in celestial mechanics it is everything. It means the tail is not being pushed. It is being aimed. Researchers traced the line. They followed the vector of that massive 400,000 kilometer structure out into the deep black. It points directly at the galactic center, Sagittarius A star, the heart of the Milky Way, the same direction it came from. Think about the implications. You have an object that enters our system, performs a gravity assist around our star, stabilizes itself, deploys a massive structure that defies the solar wind, and then locks that structure onto its point of origin. It is not a tail, it is an antenna, a high-gain transmission array. And the wobble, the oscillation detected, that is the modulation. That is the signal being encoded into the carrier wave. We may be witnessing a data transmission right now as it approaches Jupiter. 3i Atlas may be beaming everything it has learned back home. It may be uploading scan data. It may be reporting on us. This brings us to the most chilling realization of all, the timing and the destination. On March 17, 2026, 3i Atlas will make its closest approach to Euphemie, one of Jupiter's irregular outer moons. Euphemie is tiny, only 2 kilometers wide. It orbits in the Ananke group, a cluster of retrograde moons that move backwards against the natural flow of the Jovian system. The precision of this approach is extraordinary. The object will cross the Jupiter-Hill sphere boundary at 53.6 million kilometers. The Hill sphere boundary is at 53.5 million kilometers. That is a 0.1% margin of error. For an interstellar object, having traveled across light years of the void, to arrive at a specific location with this precision is statistically improbable, unless it is navigating, unless it has a destination, unless it was sent here with a purpose. If 3i Atlas enters a stable orbit around Euphemie, if it becomes Jupiter's 96th moon, the captured asteroid theory falls apart. Rocks do not just decide to join a retrograde group, they are placed there. The scientists are calling this a close approach. They are excited about the proximity. They are telling you to watch the skies because it will be interesting. But they are missing the bigger picture. This is not a flyby. This may be a rendezvous. We may be being indexed, we may be being cataloged, and in 2 months the data may be sent. So what happens when the transmission is complete? What happens when the probe finishes its mission? Does it go dormant? Does it self-destruct? Or does it receive a new command? The universe is under no obligation to be convenient or comprehensible. It contains what it contains regardless of our preferences or expectations. Our task as scientists, as observers, as thinking beings, is to look clearly at what exists and describe it accurately, even when that description challenges our assumptions. 3i Atlas is challenging assumptions, whether it ultimately confirms conventional models or requires revolutionary new understanding. The process of grappling with its anomalies advances human knowledge. That is worth doing, regardless of where the answers lead. From an intelligence perspective, the CIA's response makes sense through the lens of black swan theory. A black swan event is something highly improbable, but with massive consequences if it occurs. Intelligence agencies operate on risk assessment. Even if the probability of a threat is low, say 1%, if the impact of that threat is catastrophic, you treat it as a high-priority issue. They are hedging their bets. They are applying Pascal's wager to national security. They would rather be safe and secretive than open and sorry. They saw what happened with massive intelligence failures in the past, and they are not taking chances. But here is the problem. While the CIA hides behind neither confirm nor deny, they are letting NASA tell the public it is just a rock. They are managing information by withholding uncertainty. They are investigating the black swan in the dark while telling us it is a white swan in the light. This response from the CIA effectively confirms that 3i Atlas is being monitored by the intelligence community, distinct from the scientific community. That alone should give us pause. The scientific community is divided on how to interpret these anomalies. Some researchers maintain that all observations can be explained through natural processes, even if those processes are not yet fully understood. Others argue that the compound probability of all these anomalies occurring simultaneously in a single object is so low that alternative explanations must be considered. Professor Avi Loeb has been the most vocal advocate for serious investigation of the artificial hypothesis. He has attempted to publish papers on the anomalies, only to have them rejected by some journals as being of limited interest to the astrophysics research community. This rejection is itself noteworthy. An interstellar object exhibiting behavior that challenges standard models should be of significant interest. The fact that it is being dismissed suggests a bias in the scientific establishment toward conventional explanations, even when those explanations struggle to account for the observations. Fortunately, other journals have been more receptive. The monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society accepted Loeb's paper on the anti-tail structure. This shows that the wall of silence is not absolute. There are venues for serious scientific discussion of these anomalies. What we need now is more data, more observations, more transparency. The March 17th encounter with Jupiter will be critical. If 3i Atlas releases any objects that enter orbit around Jupiter, that would be strong evidence for technological origin. Natural fragmentation cannot impart the velocity changes necessary for orbital capture at the speeds involved. If we observe new moons around Jupiter after this date, moons that were not there before, we will have our answer. We also need access to the MAVEN data. Whatever the spacecraft observed before it went dark should be released to the scientific community. If there are legitimate national security concerns, those portions can be redacted, but the scientific data should be available for analysis. We need continued spectroscopic observations to track any changes in the chemical composition as the object moves away from the sun. We need high-resolution imaging to document the structure of the anti-tail and any changes in its configuration. And we need honest, transparent communication from the agencies that are monitoring this object. The public has a right to know what is being discovered. Science advances through open inquiry, not through classification and secrecy. If 3i Atlas is indeed artificial, if it is a probe from another civilization, what does that mean for humanity? It means we are not alone. It means there is intelligent life elsewhere in the universe. It means that interstellar travel, or at least interstellar probe deployment, is possible. It means that we are being observed, that our development, our technology, our civilization is of interest to someone else. It raises profound questions about contact. Should we attempt to communicate? What would we say? What would they say to us? It challenges our assumptions about our place in the cosmos. We are not the center of the universe. We are not the only intelligence. We are part of a larger community, whether we are ready for that or not. But even if 3i Atlas is natural, even if all the anomalies have conventional explanations, the process of investigating them is valuable. It pushes the boundaries of our knowledge. It forces us to question our assumptions. It reminds us that the universe is stranger and more complex than we imagine. We have a responsibility to pursue the truth wherever it leads. We have a responsibility to demand transparency from institutions that hold information about objects that could fundamentally change our understanding of reality. We have a responsibility to support scientists who are willing to ask uncomfortable questions and challenge conventional wisdom. We have a responsibility to keep observing, keep analyzing, keep questioning, because the truth matters, understanding matters, knowledge matters. And if there is even a small chance that we are witnessing first contact, that we are observing evidence of another civilization, we owe it to ourselves and to future generations to investigate thoroughly and honestly. Thank you for your attention. I would encourage you to follow developments as they emerge. Maintain appropriate skepticism toward both official narratives and speculative alternatives. Support continued scientific inquiry into this remarkable visitor from beyond our solar system. The questions it raises may be among the most important our species has ever confronted. or they may resolve into footnotes in the history of cometary science. Only continued observation and analysis will tell. Until we meet again, keep observing, keep questioning, keep demanding evidence for extraordinary claims. Whether those claims come from enthusiasts proposing alien origins or from officials proposing conventional explanations while withholding the data that might support them, the truth, whatever it may be, is worth pursuing. That pursuit is what science is for. 3I Atlas is still out there. Right now, as you are reading this, it is moving through space at tens of thousands of miles per hour, heading toward Jupiter, heading toward Eupheme, heading toward its destination. Every day it gets closer. Every day we get closer to the moment of truth. March 17th, 2026. That is the date. That is when we will know. NASA observed 3I Atlas. They captured data. They analyzed it. And then they said nothing. The CIA invoked the Glomar response. They classified the information. They built a legal fortress around the truth. But the truth has a way of emerging. The data has a way of leaking out. The anomalies have a way of demanding explanation. And on March 17th, when 3I Atlas reaches Jupiter, when it makes its closest approach to Eupheme, we will see what happens. Will it pass by and continue on its way? Or will it enter orbit and become Jupiter's 96th moon? Will it release objects? Will it transmit signals? Will it reveal its true nature? We do not know. But we are watching. We are documenting. We are demanding answers. Because the silence is not acceptable. The secrecy is not acceptable. The withholding of information is not acceptable. We deserve to know the truth. We deserve to see the data. We deserve to understand what is happening in our own solar system. NASA observed 3I Atlas, then said nothing. But we are not saying nothing. We are speaking up. We are asking questions. We are demanding transparency. And we will continue to do so until we get answers. The universe is vast. The cosmos is ancient. And we are just beginning to understand our place in it. 3I Atlas is a messenger from that vast cosmos, and the message it carries may be the most important we have ever received. We owe it to ourselves to listen.